We're talking about Alex Jones, right? Who I have a bit of history with. He tried to get me deported from the United States.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. What is your view of Alex Jones?
I think that Alex Jones is a sovereign individual who, very much like the rabid left, deserves a chance to speak on his points of view. I think that the truth on issues is usually somewhere in the middle between two extremes. And
So you think Sandy Hook was staged?
I don't know anything about Sandy Hook.
Really? You know he's just been sued by the families for millions and millions.
I have no idea.
You don't know anything about it?
No.
So why would you support someone in public when you know nothing about the most infamous
When
thing
have I
attached to
supported
it?
him in public?
You have supported him in public.
I've been on his podcast.
Yeah, but you said nice things about him.
I say nice things about lots of people.
What do you think of Alex Jones?
I said nice things about you, Piers.
That's fine. So you should. I'm a nice person.
So to sit and say that I've been on a podcast and I say nice things about
But
him
you
means
said
I
you support his right to speak about things like Sandy Hook?
I don't know Sandy Hook. I don't know. And
You know what it was?
It was a mass shooting.
Of school children.
Okay. But to sit and
he,
it's actually, no, let's stop for a second. Please don't interrupt me. Here's why I know why you're good at your job. First, you interrupt people a lot, which is good. It's a good skill.
Actually,
and then here you go, prove me right.
But here's exactly
and the timing's good.
Here's exactly what I do. I only interrupt people like you when you either refuse to answer the question or answer a completely different one.
Sure.
And I want to remind you of what the question was.
Fair enough.
Or when you misquote me back, which you've done repeatedly through the interview, where you say, you see, Piers, you agree with me. And the viewer who's been watching will go, no, he didn't.
Cool, no problem. The other thing you do is you try and set these traps like now. So you're saying
What's the trap you think I'm setting?
You're saying that I agree with every single point of view a man has.
I literally didn't say that.
You're saying, well, you support Alex Jones.
Why would you misquote me?
Because you're saying you support Alex Jones and you said you've been on his podcast and he said this. I don't know
what do you think of Alex Jones?
I don't know everything he said.
What do you think of him?
I think on his podcast he was cordial. I think he was professional on his podcast. I've also done podcasts with rabid leftists and people who openly hate me.
Is it wrong?
I do a podcast circuit.
Okay.
So and I don't know everything he's ever said.
When somebody like
and I don't know what you're trying to get me here because I did a podcast.
If you let me get a word in edgeways, I'll tell you.
It's a lame trick.
If you let me get a word in,
sure.
I will tell you.
Let's go.
Alex Jones said that Sandy Hook didn't happen. It was staged by actors.
Okay.
This compounded the appalling grief of the families of those poor 20 children who were gunned to pieces by a lunatic with an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle. They were already grief-stricken beyond belief, and this guy poured petrol onto that grief quite deliberately to make a huge amount of money from his InfoWars fake news bullshit. And as a result, a lot of the families have now sued him, and they've won, and he's going to have to pay back tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in damages to these families. And quite right, it won't do anything about the pain he caused them. Some of them actually had people turn up outside their houses with guns because Alex Jones had told them that these parents were making it all up. They were all staged actors. It was all run by the government. So I simply say to you, now I've told you that, what is your view of Alex Jones?
I don't see why any of that has to do with me. It's very interesting. I've done the guy's podcast. I know him well. He was professional and courteous to me. When I meet somebody and they show me respect, I show them back. Respect. That's what I do, as I did with you.
You respect him?
If somebody shows me respect, I show them respect back.
So if Adolf Hitler showed you respect, you'd respect him back?
That's a stupid question, Piers.
It's not. It's a logical extension of your argument.
No, if in 1931 I was walking through Germany and a man come up to me and said, sorry for bumping into you, I'd say, sorry, no problem, mate. I'd show respect back. I don't know, what are you trying to say? That I sanction the Holocaust?
You literally just said if somebody respects you, you respect them back
I say if somebody shows me respect, I show respect back. That's a good way to go through life.
Whoever it is.
If somebody shows me respect and is courteous to me, I'm courteous back. Yes.
How can you respect somebody who caused such misery and pain to Sandy Hook?
I have no idea the specifics of the thing you're discussing. I don't understand any of it.
Well,
I don't know anything about it. You've told me your version of events.
When did you go on the podcast?
I was on the podcast about four times in the last 4 years. I did one relatively recently.
So four times you went on Alex Jones's podcast.
Correct.
Promoting him, helping him make money.
I don't think it was promoting and helping him because...
Well, it's his podcast.
Well, yeah, but I've been on the podcasts of people who absolutely hate me. I've been on liberal left-wing podcasts. I've been on feminist podcasts.
Fine.
And no, you just sat here saying I would like you to agree, perhaps we can agree on this point, that I'm not a feminist. I go on feminist podcasts. I do a podcast circuit.
You're not a feminist?
I don't know.
What do you think a feminist is?
Well, let's not change subject here, Pierce. Stay on the
Hang
subject.
on, you mentioned feminism.
Completely, but you're trying to get away from the point, because what you did is you're trying to say, because I did a podcast, I sanction all of this person's views. And I'm saying I do 5 podcasts a week. I do 5 podcasts a week, and I don't sanction 100% the views of any other person on the planet, because I'm an individual, and he has an individual views, as do you. So I don't know why you're trying to come at me with one of his views and pretend that's something to do with me.
Because it's a pretty big view.
No, but it's a lame trick, Piers, and you're better than this. So let's move on.
Would you,
it's lame, and let's move on.
If Vladimir Putin had a podcast, would you go on it?
Sure.
You would? Great. Okay, let me know what you're talking about.
If Vladimir Putin had a podcast, I'd go on it. If Joe Biden had a podcast, I'd go on it. If a feminist has a podcast, I'll go on it. If Piers Morgan has a podcast, I'll go on it. If Alex Jones, I don't see the point you're making. There's no point here. You're digging, but there's nothing to find.
Well, I'm not. I'm taking your position that if somebody shows you respect them.
I think that...
I'm saying there are lots of people in the world I do not respect. If Vladimir Putin showed me respect, I would not respect him.
That's your opinion. But
no, it's my view. What's your view? Okay,
that's your view. Well, your
view is you would.
You're sitting here, Piers, saying that I'm on Uncensored Show, and in your intro you said that it's important that we don't have echo chambers and we have varying...
Correct.
And that we have varying opinions.
Correct.
But then you're saying the people you don't like, you wouldn't go on their podcast.
No.
So you are a hypocrite.
No,
I will go on anybody's podcast and discuss any point.
I don't think you understand what censorship means, do you? Like a lot of words we've had problems with today.
You're just saying What do you
think censorship means?
No, but the point I'm trying to make here...
Hang on. What do you think censorship means?
Don't hide from the fact that you're saying you will only do podcasts with people you like.
Why do you think that's censorship?
No, that's your prerogative. My prerogative is
What does it do with censorship?
I'll discuss opinions with anybody, and I've done hard left wing. Why are you not asking me about the podcasts I've done for the people who are hard liberal left wing?
By the way, I don't care whether they're left or right. Okay. Extremists to me are all nuts, right?
Then we agree.
Yes.
So perfect.
Good.
Next subject.
All right, here's my next subject. It was a very serious case here.
Jesus. And before we move on, sorry, Piers, but before you move on, I do find it kind of disingenuous, and I know we're on a show, and I don't have a personal problem with you, but it is kind of disingenuous to try and sit here and lump me in with some school shooting. That's nothing to do with me. That's nothing to do with me. On any level.
Let me respond.
On any level.
Let me explain. Like you've just said, you've been on this podcast 4 times.
In 4 years.
Since he said the whole thing was staged.
I don't know when he said
it. And I think the fact that a smart guy like you wants me to believe you had no idea that Alex Jones, who's been in the news now for the last 2 years for being sued by these families for the most heinous thing imaginable of pouring petrol onto their grief by claiming that shooting was staged. The fact that you're pretending you didn't know about any of that.
It's not about pretending I didn't.
You've been on his podcast 4 times, supporting him and making him money. So damn right I'm going to call you out on it.
When I do a podcast, if you think I spend time analyzing the point of view of that person and everything they've ever said for years beforehand.
It's not years, it was minutes in most cases.
Years and years.
When did you last go on this? When did you last go on his podcast?
You trying to lump me in and attack me for a person whose podcast I do having a view is absolutely childish. Because I've done a bunch of podcasts with people.
You would do a podcast.
I've done a bunch of podcasts with people who are advocating for things that I do not agree with on every single level. In fact, most of my podcasts are me disagreeing with people. So it's completely crazy that you're trying to lump me in with that. That's cheap. That's cheap.
You are completely misconstruing the point of what I'm saying. I think deliberately.
No, what you're trying is a cheap trick. And I'm just making it clear to the audience.
It's not a cheap trick. I'm just curious where your moral line is.
It's a cheap trick.
Where's your moral line?
I disagree with the points of view with the majority of the people I do podcasts with. So it's a very cheap trick you're trying here. So
when people invent vile things to make themselves rich off the back of families of little kids who've been blown to pieces with a machine gun or a semi-automatic version of a machine gun, I think that is actually a line I wouldn't cross. I wouldn't be happy to go on someone's podcast when they've been responsible for doing that. It's not about political views or differences of opinion over facts. It's about somebody deliberately inventing a pack of lies to compound the grief of families. And I'm curious, you don't think you have any need to go down any kind of moral quandary about people like that before you continue to allow them to use you for their own promotion.
He didn't use me. He didn't use me for
Why does he have you on the podcast?
Because we disagreed and discussed points like we're doing with you right now.
Did you call him out on that?
Are you using me? We didn't discuss that.
I'm not using you. I'm giving you a platform most people aren't giving you right now to show the world who you really are.
Fantastic. So neither of us are using each other. I'm here on your show. I'm providing you with content. You're giving me a platform. And nobody's using each other. It's mutual. We don't agree on a whole bunch of issues.
That's fine.
And here we are.
I think we've had a robust exchange.
Yeah, just like I've done on nearly every other podcast. And if someone were to come and say to me in the future that something heaven forbid, there's a skeleton in your closet, and someone were to come to me and say, you were on Piers Morgan's show, did you know he's X or he's done X? I would say that's absolutely nothing to do with me.
Right. But
I make the same point protecting you. I don't know what you do. I don't know your personal life.
I can guarantee one thing. I will not be inventing stories about the families of kids.
I hope not. I hope you're a righteous person. But I don't know.
I'm not claiming to be a righteous person.
I don't know.
I'm just saying that I just think it's interesting that you have no moral compulsion about going on people.
It's not about moral compulsions. It's about I don't know what you do, Piers. You could have a bunch of skeletons in your closet, my friend. I don't have a clue. I'm here on your TV show.
I'm sure we all have lots of skeletons. Well, Andrew Tate joins me again now. Andrew, good to see you.
Salam alaikum, Piers.
Good to see you. I've genuinely been amazed by the reaction I've had in the streets. Not just here, but I went to Qatar for the World Cup, had the same thing there. A lot of people coming up about Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously, but also a lot of people coming up about you. And they were almost exclusively men, young men, who genuinely see you as a role model, as somebody who inspires them, as somebody they want to be like.
Yep.
So that made me think, the first interview you had was quite combative. The second time, a shorter interview, less so. I want to try and work out, in this one, who you are. Because it struck me as extraordinary that Google this week revealed some stats for the year. The #1 person whose name followed people Google searching who is in 2022 was Andrew Tate.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable. I think there's a whole swath of the population, especially young men, that feel disenfranchised. They feel disenfranchised with the media machine and the things they're supposed to believe. They don't feel an affinity with the educational systems or the culture. And they look at a person like me who stands up and says the things that many young men think. I haven't put a magic spell on the world. The fact that people like what I say means that they agree with me deep inside. They may be afraid to say it themselves, but I am seen as a bastion of free speech and a bastion for masculinity as a whole, because a lot of men are largely forgotten about.
Do you think you're a force for good, or are you a force in evolution where perhaps you've done and said stuff you shouldn't have done, and as you get older, perhaps as you get bigger, more followed around the world, you sense a responsibility perhaps you didn't have early on?
Well, we all evolve. Every human evolves day by day. You wouldn't be human if you didn't evolve on an hour-by-hour basis. But I do not think I'm a force for good. I absolutely not really know I am a force for good, because I'm a force for truth. And truth is a good thing. Without truth, we're going to end up in absolute tyranny and slavery, and we're already on our way there. I feel like we're starting to combat it. My cancellation was the beginning of a change in public consciousness. Elon having Twitter is another beginning of the change in public consciousness. And anybody who stands up and speaks what they truly believe, even if it's something I don't personally agree with, I think that truth is absolutely important. And people's personal truths and people's personal opinions, even on differing sides of the same opinion, should be heard.
Tell me about your life. You were born to a mixed race couple. Your father was an African-American, a chess player.
Yeah.
And your mother, she was from this country.
Correct, yeah. So my father was black chess player. He was in the Air Force. He met my mother here in England. And then I was raised initially in the United States. And then I moved to Luton, England when I was younger. So I've moved around a lot. I've lived an eclectic life in many different scenarios. We've moved around. I've done a lot of different things, lived a lot of different experiences. And
what
I'm thankful for
nationality
it.
are you? I mean, what do you identify as?
I consider myself British now, but I will say that part of me, the patriotic Brit inside of me, is devastated by the state of the UK currently, and I want to make that very clear. The patriotic Brit in me truly loves this country, and seeing what's happening to it, especially to our major cities, is almost heartbreaking to watch in real time.
In what way?
It's falling apart. This is a failed society. By every metric you can possibly measure, it is absolutely and utterly failing. The cost of living crisis, the crime rates, everything is falling apart. If you compare it to a country like the United Arab Emirates, you compare it to a city like Dubai, London, which should be the greatest city on earth, is failing in absolutely every metric because our leadership is a joke. If you look at Dubai and the UAE, the leadership there is so flawless, so genuinely genius. They saw ahead and have built almost a utopia. And then you look at London, you can't even walk around with a watch on. It's disgusting.
You know, it's very interesting. I was in Qatar for the World Cup. Obviously, a lot of people in England taking a very censorious moral view about the World Cup being in the Middle East at all because of their laws against homosexuality, because of their treatment of migrant workers. I've got to say, not that I don't share the concerns about those things, of course I do, but I found a lot of the virtue signalling, and I think that's what it was in many cases, about the whole region actually quite distasteful. Because when I was in Qatar, I thought the World Cup was fantastically well run, incredibly good experience. But a lot of Qataris were saying to me, you know, there's this weird, quaint feeling back in your country that we all want to aspire to behave like that we all want to live in a country with massive drug problems, with massive knife crime issues, with scenes like the European Championships final where it's complete lawlessness going on, where stuff like the NHS, the system of healthcare, is basically collapsing, where the education system is dropping behind, so on and so on and so on. And it's a really interesting perspective. They were like, I know you all think that we want to have your form of democracy and your form of life, but actually, we're fine, thanks.
Absolutely, because it's a failed society, and it's godless. I think it's disgusting. We leave our old people to rot in old people's homes, and then we sit there and say we don't have enough money for nurses. I understand this nurse strike very well and how frustrating it can be if you walk into a hospital and the nurse is not prepared to work. But the nurses would be prepared to work at the current wage if they believed this country was spending its money prudently. When you see this country spending its money and just absolutely wasting it, pulling out of thin air to fund proxy wars, God knows where, that has nothing to do with them. Of course, as a nurse, you're going to stand up and say, well, can't I get a pay rise? This country has failed on every metric, and especially our major cities. I've just come to London now. I made it very clear to my private jet pilot. I said, fuel the jet and leave it running, because the second I'm finished talking to peers, I'm leaving this cesspit. It's disgusting. This country, and London as a whole, 10 years ago, was one of the most hospitable cities on earth. Now you cannot walk around safely with a watch on. And you're a full-grown man. You're a full-grown adult. When's the last time there's been a serious problem in your life that you completely ignored and it fixed itself? Never, ever. What are any of our politicians doing to fix any of the problems we're genuinely facing?
Well, I saw today that Sadiq Khan is planning to run again for the third term of office as mayor. All I can say is everyone I know who's had any experience of crime at any level in London in the last few years has had a bad experience of the way it's been handled. You know, I mean, I can give an example. I can reveal this now. I've talked for 18 months. I got a specific death threat on one of my son's Instagram pages in public, a public comment. And it was very specific about what this person was going to do. Yeah. I couldn't use the police to evade him. We know where you live. We're going to come and kill you. And then a second one threatening my son and his mother, my ex-wife. I called in the police. I thought, I'm not having them putting death threats on my son's son.
Sure.
I called the police. Police investigated this. They arrested somebody over a year ago. And then I heard from the police this week that despite 18 months of investigation, of a publicly posted comment on Instagram threatening to kill me on my son's Instagram, that they will not be able to pursue the case. Now, and I thought, imagine, I'm high profile. This was a front page of the Sun newspaper, this story.
If that same man called a transgender person the wrong pronouns, he would be in trouble.
Right.
So doesn't it just show how absolutely asinine and banal our legal system has become? That would never happen in a country like United Arab Emirates, the place I'm now residing in, Dubai, where the leadership has common sense. And I'm saying that all the leadership structures, doesn't matter if it's Labour or Conservative, across all of it in this nation have completely and utterly failed. Sadiq Khan is a loser, because when you have a city which is losing, which London is losing in all metrics across its competitive cities around the world, and you're in charge of it, by extension, you're a loser. I will tell you right now, instead of virtue signaling and giving Qatar a hard time over their religious beliefs, what we should be doing is a treaty with Qatar to build a prison deep in the desert. Make me mayor of London. We'll make a prison deep in the desert. And if you're caught with a knife or robbing someone, you can go do 25 years with one meal a day in the scorching sun. And then what we'll do is we'll put cameras there and we'll interview you once a week and broadcast that out to the nation and see if you change your mind and make people understand that this is a country that should be respected and our laws should be respected. Instead, what happens? What has Sadiq or any of the people in charge of this country actually done to fix any of our issues besides sit around and talk? Nothing. None of them have done anything, but they seem ultra concerned with finding money for proxy wars, ultra concerned with rainbow flags in another country that is uninterested in them, and their priorities are completely messed up. Of course the ambulance people are. Of course the ambulance drivers are striking. Of course the nurses are striking. Nobody cares about the most important things in this nation. It's a failing country in real time, and that's why I've left.
What about the specific allegation? By the way, I don't disagree with a lot of that, because I do think this country is in big trouble. And I do think that one of the problems is people think if they do have a crime against them, nobody cares anymore.
I know nobody cares. I have specific examples and people who I know personally. Absolutely and utterly nobody cares. I was in Harrods yesterday and someone tried to rob someone's watch in the middle of the store. I walk around with I have a security team of 6 full-grown men, plus me and my brother, 8 military-age males, all over 110 kilos, big men, just so I can walk around this city. It's absolutely unacceptable.
What about the issue of race? And I mentioned that in the context of the Harry and Meghan ongoing debate, their war with the royal family, war against the monarchy, their specific, constant referencing to the fact that they believe they were driven out of here because of racism in Britain. What do you make of that debate?
That's absolute fallacy.
And you're from a mixed race background yourself.
Correct. I'm from a mixed race background myself. And while we're discussing the leaders of the UK, although I do think they're doing a terrible job, it's kind of hard for Meghan to say that the UK is a racist country when the leader of the UK is darker skinned than her and the mayor of London is darker skinned than her. And I am a person who's probably darker skinned than her, and I've never experienced any kind of bigotry against myself besides the fact I'm a straight male. I'll get bigotry for that before I'll get bigotry for my skin color. I think it's just a cop-out, and her not wanting to be perspicacious and self-reflective enough to understand that she has attacked an age-old institution, and there are people who are very patriotic about that institution. And by attacking it and bringing a degree of distaste to it, there's going to be people who don't like her. And if you're a dislikable person, you can't just instantly stand up and say it's because of my skin color. It might be because of your actions and some of the things you've said.
I mean, I think there's probably no doubt she's had racism on social media because it's...
Who hasn't, Piers?
It's a cesspit.
You probably have.
Well, as I said just now, I've had death threats on social media and no one seemed to care very much.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably inarguable. My issue with what they've both been doing is if you're going to make allegations against an institution like the royal family and the monarchy, you've got to actually provide some evidence. You can't just spray gun this thing out there and say, well, somebody was racist.
Yeah, and airing dirty laundry is never going to be respected by the populace, and being a tattletale is never going to be respected by the populace. And I think the problem with the modern world we're living in is a lot of age-old traditions are being destroyed in real time. It doesn't matter what the tradition is. Most of them are being eroded. And something like the British royal family, which has been around for a very long time, is an age-old tradition. One of the things holding the UK together, one of the last things we have, to sit and detriment it and to sit and insult it and to give away secrets from inside of it and try and paint a negative image of it is going to upset a lot of people. And you have to be prepared for that backlash. You can't say, I've done things that upset people, but it's nothing to do with what I've done. It's purely because of my skin color. Also, it's kind of ironic that she's doing that because she's not particularly dark-skinned. It's kind of funny to watch her sit and say,
yeah,
race.
I think the truth is, I don't know what... Look, you can say that. I can't. The reality of it is, I just don't know what the specifics of the racism she says she's had because we've not seen any evidence.
The universe is a funny place, Piers. If you're looking for something, you're going to find it, right? When I got canceled, when they attacked me unfairly, lied about me across the entire mainstream media, deleted me from social media so I couldn't defend myself, and lied about me repeatedly, I could have stood up and said, it's because I'm brown. I didn't do that. I sat and said, okay, there's people who misunderstand my message. My message is a positive one. People misunderstand me. Let me self-reflect and understand that, yes, perhaps this said a long time ago was said in the wrong way. Perhaps this was misunderstood. Perhaps people don't understand this. I could have just copped out and could have just been refusing to self-reflect on any level and said, it's because I'm brown, that's why they did it. But that's not the mature way to be as an adult.
What did you think of the Jeremy Clarkson furore where he wrote what I think most people, but including him belatedly after he'd published it and written the column, he did make an analogy from a Game of Thrones scene, which most people, I think, did find crossed a line and was deeply offensive. I think it crossed a line. What do you think?
Yeah, I understand why people feel that. But when you attack an institution as old as the British royal family, you're attacking patriotism in and of itself for one of the most respected countries or previously most respected countries on earth, and you're going to have some visceral reactions. Perhaps Jeremy Clarkson is too famous and too well-renowned to say those kind of things, but there's a lot of people who genuinely feel that way, and that's why he said it. And this is what happens when you attack age-old institutions in any country.
Should he have apologized?
That's a good question. It looks like he did. Personally, I think as a man, you should stand up, say what you mean what you say. I don't think you should ever apologize for anything you've ever said. Even me.
What if you say something truly very offensive and you actually do regret it?
If you truly regret it, then yeah, okay, you can apologize. But if at the time you meant it, then the best thing you can do is say, look, I have just changed my mind. I no longer feel that way. But at the time, that's how I felt. And I'm the person who says what he feels. And that's what I felt at the time. And I apologize that offended you.
You lead a righteous life?
I think I do, yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
You boasted openly of having 6, 7 partners at once. So is that righteous? I'm not taking there's no moral view from me. Simply asking you what you think righteous means.
I think righteous is living true to your heart and knowing that you're doing good by people, not snaking anybody, not lying to anybody. I know I live a very righteous life.
Have you ever been in love?
Yeah.
How many times?
Plenty. I believe in love between men and women.
Real love, where it's...
Yeah. I believe...
How many times would you say?
Enough. I believe men and women are a beautiful union. I think we're slightly different, but when we work together, we're the most powerful force in the world.
How many women have you loved?
I don't know, Piers. A few.
Give me a ballpark. 5, 10, 20?
let's say...
You don't forget how many people you've been in love with.
Let's say 10. I mean, I've been in love, and I certainly believe that men and women, when they work together, it's the most beautiful force on the planet. I believe in family. I believe in children. I believe in...
If you believe in family and children and love, why are you single?
I'm not single.
Well, you're not married. That's what I mean.
Well, if I was married, the last thing I would do is advertise it to the feral psychopaths on the internet. So
I'm not a feral psychopath.
Well,
you called me friend earlier.
Can be debated, Piers. But the point I'm making as a whole is that all of these...
Do you want to get married? Is my point.
No, but let's please for a second.
You don't or you do?
Let's please for a second, because you've interrupted me so many times I've failed to...
Well, actually, I've only interrupted you, just to be clear, when you've actually answered a different question.
Cool. Well, then, on all these points you're making...
And you've admitted that.
On all these points you're making, on repeat, you're taking these sentences and on repeat you're you're weaponizing them against me.
I'm not weaponizing anything.
Okay, it's fine.
No. You're weaponizing the weaponizing, which doesn't exist.
No problem.
But you said to me, come on, bring it on, read out all the things that you think are blatant misogyny. All I've done is literally read out all the things we identified from all the research that I thought were blatantly misogynist.
Understood.
And giving you the chance to respond. And the only time I've interrupted you is when you've tried to answer a completely different question.
Understood, Piers. But these things were said in large context where often I'm talking about how, for example, on the same podcast where you've read one of them sentences from, I was talking about how it's a man's duty to die by a woman. And the guy asked me, he said, if 10 men with knives attacked your woman, wouldn't you just... I said, yeah, I'd stand and die. I'd never just run away, because I have a duty as a man. I must die on the spot to protect her honor and my honor. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about a man having responsibility to his duties. I'm talking about the old traditional ways of masculinity. And what happens is a few sentences from such a long conversation is taken and used against me.
I understand that.
So I want you to understand that I'm talking about protecting and providing for women. I'm talking about a man making sure...
Do you want to get married?
No, but we have to all feed into each other, Piers. I'm talking about
protecting. It's not a hard question.
No, but I'm talking about protecting and providing for a woman. I'm talking about a man being responsible for her safety.
I understand.
So of course I believe in men and women. Of course I believe in love. Of course I believe in marriage. Of course I believe in family.
No, but
the idea that I don't believe in the idea that I don't believe in these things is crazy.
I didn't ask you if you believed in it. I asked you if you're going to get married.
One day, absolutely.
You'd like to.
If I'm not married already, I will be married one day. If I'm not.
Well, you might be secretly married.
I could be married, correct.
Why would you not tell me either way?
Why would I advertise to the feral psychopaths of the world who have tried their very best to destroy me for an opinion about my private life and the things that are most sacred to me? Why would I do that?
If you said you were married, everyone would hate you?
I don't know about people hate me. It's about me understanding that I'm a hard target, but I am very, very protective of the people I care about.
Right. But you believe in the concept of marriage?
Completely. That's what we were talking about the whole time.
What do you think?
We talked about a man giving a woman away. Okay. I believe in marriage more than anybody. In fact, I believe in marriage no, please. Okay. I believe in marriage in the traditional sense. I believe a man has a duty to stand up and be a real man. I believe that the problem with the world today that we are facing is that not enough men are sticking to the age-old ways of masculinity. Mm-hmm. I believe that me standing up and saying a man must protect a woman and provide for her, so he needs to make sure that she's safe. He needs a degree of authority to protect her.
I have no problem with...
But people do have a problem with it. And that's the world we're in now.
Andrew, welcome back to this special edition of Piers Morgan Uncensored with Andrew Tate, one-on-one. So Ash Sarkar, who's a lively contributor to this programme, has tweeted, Andrew Tate, who you're interviewing about free speech, thinks women are a man's property. We shouldn't be allowed to drive. Boasts about only dating teenagers to imprint on them. Misogynists are disgusting whether they're in Afghanistan or a swanky London studio.
Am I a misogynist, am I? I don't think... First of the things she said, I don't even truly believe. If you're prepared to listen to me, I'll explain to you exactly why she's completely and utterly wrong. If you can go through the points again, she said...
Do you think you're a misogynist?
Absolutely not. I'm not a misogynist on any level. This is one of those buzzwords they just throw at people randomly. Homophobic, racist, misogynist, they just throw it out at people.
What is your view of women?
I'm a realist.
What is your real view of women?
I absolutely not really love women. I adore women. I have good relationships with women. Not a single woman has come up to me on the street since I've been canceled. Not a single one has said anything negative. Every single one of them has said positive things. You're a traditional male. I wish more men were like you. You understand your masculine roles. You understand what you're supposed to do. You understand you're supposed to protect women. You're exactly the kind of man I'd be looking for. I've never had a negative interaction with a female ever since I've been dubbed the biggest misogynist.
Where is the...
Please let me finish. I'm sorry, Piers. Also, there's not been a single woman who's accused me of a crime, not a single woman who's accused me of rape, not a single woman who's come out and said anything from my entire past of 36 years I've done anything wrong ever. Anybody else with my level of fame, any footballer, any other movie star, at least has people who've come out and accused them of rape, X, Y, Z. I have no woman who's come out and ever said I've hurt her, no woman who's come out and ever said I've done damage to her or been horrible to her. Everybody who ever interacted with me has said I've been a nice person. All of them. So this random Twitter nobody who seems to know so much is full of...
All right, you've responded to her tweet.
Yeah, she's a liar.
But here's where is the line for you between masculinity, which I will always defend, and which I agree with? I think a lot of women like men to be masculine, and what has become known as toxic masculinity. And the reason I ask you is that you are engaged in that debate with men all the time. Where is the line for you where men shouldn't cross, where the behaviour should be kept within a line?
Please define toxic masculinity.
Well, you tell me what you think it crosses a line from being a masculine, good man to a bad man.
There's no such thing as too much masculinity if it's genuinely masculine. Genuine masculinity is not out here to hurt people. It's absolutely the opposite. It's out here to protect. And when bad things happen, they call traditionally masculine men. If you need a firefighter, you need a masculine man. When you call the police because of the problem you have, you want masculine men. And as soon as a woman or a man is in trouble, when you look for backup, you look for masculine men. And masculine men have a duty to provide and protect those they care about. We have a duty to do things we don't feel like doing because we know we're supposed to do them. And that's why we stayed in the Titanic and died. Those were masculine men.
Where did you get your views about this from?
This is what I grew up with. It's the family I grew up around. And
your father, your mother?
Yeah,
both?
and the world I lived in. And I think a lot of the things I'm saying now about masculinity and how people should act in the world, how the world should function, were considered completely normal and accepted by everybody only 20 years ago. I think the world's just lost its mind. For me to stand up and say a man should protect a woman now gets to be called a misogynist and canceled. If I said that 10 years ago, everyone would say, duh. And what's funny is, everyone who argues against me and says men shouldn't protect women, especially all the feminists, if they were with their boyfriend and a man broke into their house, guess who they'd expect to go downstairs? Who do you think? Think they go themselves? Are they going to Afghanistan? No, we send men to do these things. So
well, we send women in the armed forces too.
You have to generalize when you make points.
There are many courageous people.
Exceptions do not disprove the rule.
No, but you've got to concede there are many courageous women serving in the armed forces.
Absolutely and utterly, completely correct. But by and large, traditionally, soldiers are men. Exceptions do not disprove the rule.
Well, it's not an exception. It's a fact that there are a lot of women now in the armed forces.
Correct. But if you were to take the average soldier, they are a male. If you're allowed to say who's a male and who isn't nowadays, I'm assuming their gender, I apologize. If you were to take the average soldier, they're a male, which means that exceptions are the female soldiers, which because there's a lower percent of them, a lower probability. Exceptions do not disprove the rules. Men do the fighting. Right now in Ukraine, men cannot leave. Women are allowed to leave because men have to fight in the front line and women are allowed to go to Dubai. That is how it is.
What do you say to young men who come to you for advice, who feel lost, who don't really know where they fit into society?
I say that life as a man is exceptionally difficult. I say the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing about being a man is you're born without value. Society doesn't care about you. You're only going to be cared about based on how useful you are. You have the chance to build yourself up and become a superhero if you're prepared to do the hard work and be indefatigable enough to never quit. But if you're going to stand around and wait for a handout, nobody's going to ever respect you. And I think that a lot of people have forgotten about how difficult and how competitive it is as a man. We're always in constant competition with each other. And it's your duty as a man to stand up and say, I want to be as important and strong and good-hearted and God-fearing as possible, and I need to work hard to achieve those things.
Dame Sheila Hancock says we've become too over-emotional as a society, crying too much about everything. Has she got a point?
She's completely right. And the dangerous thing about overly emotional men is that they're dangerous. They're genuinely dangerous. This is what's crazy. All these people who talk about toxic masculinity and how bad it is for men to be traditionally masculine. A traditionally masculine man does things he doesn't feel like doing because it is his duty to do them. He charges into the building because it is his duty. Not because he feels like it, because it is his duty. We're now teaching the new generation of men that they don't have duty and they can just act on their feelings and act how they feel and they don't have to act as a man should. Do you know what happens when you get men who just act how they feel? You get school shooters, you get violence, you get rapists. Men who do not control their emotions are dangerous. If you find a man who is stoic, he's not going to hurt people. He's going to sit and think about his actions very carefully, and he's going to be a good man who protects and provides for his family. You find a man who just acts out on impulse and does whatever he feels like, you're going to find a dangerous man. Sitting here telling men to cry more and act with their feelings and it's okay to feel this way, that way, etc., and have no self-control. That is why we have the problems we have in the world. Absolutely and utterly wrong. So when they talk about toxic masculinity, they have it completely inversed on its head, completely and utterly wrong. We need to be teaching stoicism. We need to be teaching young men to understand that the world is very, very difficult. It's hard to be a man. You're going to feel bad sometimes. You need to suck it up and perform anyway. Not to sit there and cry your eyes out or blame other people.
Tough being a woman, too, in modern society.
It's certainly tough being a woman, but I'm not a woman, so why would I speak on issues I do not understand? I'm a man.
You can feel an empathy for women.
I feel empathy, certainly, but I do not understand their issues.
See, a lot of men come up to me and they admire you. I've got to say, a lot of women I've spoken to don't admire. They think you represent misogyny. They think when they hear you not commit to saying the Taliban shouldn't be banning women from university education, well, why can't he just say that's wrong?
Well, firstly, that's not my experience. I experience the absolute and utter opposite of that. Secondly, It's because it's a moral point I'm making. My moral point is I speak on things I understand. I speak on experiences I've had.
But do you believe in equality?
Yes. I speak on subjects I know intimately. I do not feel qualified. I'm a realist, and I do not feel qualified to sit and discuss the gender laws in Afghanistan. I have not been to Afghanistan. I have not researched the subject thoroughly. I'm not going to sit here and say how the Taliban should be running their country. It's nothing to do with me. I find it quite flattering, Piers, that although, I understand I'm monumentally influential, the most Google man on earth, etc., I find it very flattering that you think I have some kind of control over the domestic policy of Afghanistan. But I assure you I don't. I don't.
No,
so it's nothing to do with
I'm not asking you to have a view on having influence of a domestic policy. I'm sure the Taliban couldn't give a stuff what either of us say about it. It's just curious to me that it's an easy win for you to make women think you're not anti them, to say that when they're not given equality, as the women in Afghanistan clearly are not, because they're not allowed to go to university now as of today, that is clearly unequal, unfair. We should all be able to agree that that is wrong.
Well, certainly as a realist.
Even you, tough guy Andrew
It's
Tate.
not tough guy. I am a professional. As a professional, I can state that yes, it is not equal. Yes, it is not fair. That is obvious for anybody. I'm not saying those things are not true. What I'm saying is it's nothing to do with me.
Right, OK, but you made a concession you think is wrong then.
I said it's unequal and it's unfair.
Yeah, so wrong.
Well, perhaps.
Force yourself, Andrew.
No, perhaps it's wrong under certain moral guidelines, but under the moral guidelines which are currently in charge of the jurisdiction of Afghanistan, they don't believe it's wrong. It's nothing to do with me. Well, I'm not going to sit here and tell other countries how to run their laws. I'm going to live in societies with laws I respect.
You know what? I'll take unfair and unequal.
Sure.
Because that's self-explanatory. Well, joining me now is Andrew Tate, whose videos have been viewed billions of times online, but he's been banned from pretty much every mainstream social media platform, including Twitter. Andrew Tate, welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Your take on this, I think, is quite interesting because you've been a victim of being, if victim's the right word, but you've been removed from social media platforms for your opinions. Elon Musk has dedicated himself, he says, to restoring free speech. Do you think that's going to include you, for example?
I don't think it matters if it includes me or not. I think what's important is that free speech is the #1 weapon against absolute tyranny. And although you cannot have complete free speech because then conversations completely break down into asinine insult fests, I do like the idea of the changing of the guard when it comes to control over information.
Is it possible, Andrew Tate, to actually police something like Twitter, to be a platform for genuine free speech? Or is it so toxic and tribal now that whatever happens, before we had all the people on the right screaming away that they were being no platformed and so on. Now you've got all the people on the left screaming that they're being diminished in some way. It's very tribal, very toxic. Can Musk cut through that? And if so, how?
Yeah, it's going to be extremely difficult. There's always going to be one group of people who are extremely unhappy, but I think that anybody who's perspicacious enough to understand the truth of what's been going on in the world recently will know that the left and their narratives have certainly been protected for a very long time. And the universe has swings and balances, and God often restores balance to the universe, and perhaps it might swing the other way for a while. I truthfully am a person who believes that all points of view are extremely important, because as soon as you block points of view, you have absolute tyranny.
And in a way, it's sort of self-defeating, isn't it? Because you carried on getting huge attention. It was interesting to me that when you came on the show, for example, we've had, I think, nearly 6 million people have viewed the whole interview that we did, which is a huge number of people, certainly far higher than watched it on conventional television. So you have a whole world out there online which operates away from social media platforms.
Yeah, I've been very, very successful in spite of them, but not many people can do that. I'm in a pretty unique position, but I think that everybody needs a voice to a degree, and social media platforms are now the most important platforms on the planet. They control information, and they influence real-world decisions, and they influence people's perception of reality. The last few years of COVID have been a perfect example of what happens when you censor one side of the argument and you only allow one point of view to be purported by the matrix in and of itself, and that's how you end up in tyrannical situations. I think you were just discussing that, Piers.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfectly valid point. people have quite rightly held me to task over some of the positions I took during the COVID pandemic, notably when the scientists said as a definitive fact that you couldn't transmit the virus if you had the vaccine. It turned out that wasn't true. And I based my observations on that supposed fact and said, right, well, in that case, if you refuse to be vaccinated, you shouldn't get the same rights as people who've been vaccinated. If it's true that if you're unjabbed, you can pass it on. It turned out, actually, there's not much difference whether you've been vaccinated or not. And at that point, I changed my mind. But I felt that there were a lot of people who were being deplatformed from Twitter at the time for questioning the validity of scientific statements, and they would then be a complete U-turn. So I do think it was a very interesting period, actually, for testing what free speech means.
It was actually worse than that. You're right, Piers, but it was actually worse than interesting, because what happens is when you censor an entire side of the argument and only allowed one side of the argument to have a voice, you are changing reality in real time. You are shaping the world. The only reason that scam continued as long as it did, and the only reason people didn't get to see their own parents get buried, and the only reason people sat and missed cancer appointments because they were scared of the common cold, was because they were censoring anybody who said anything contrary to the purported version of events that the mainstream media decided they want the entire world to swallow. It's beyond simply interesting, and it's beyond simply funny or coincidental.
Yeah, I mean, I will challenge you on one thing. It's not the common cold, right? COVID-19 has killed 6.6 million people. It is one of the most deadly viruses, certainly of our lifetime. So it wasn't the common cold, but I do think it is completely justified for people to say we should be more cautious, I think, about accepting during fast-moving pandemics the word of scientists as being sacrosanct, because on a number of things, from the use of masks to the efficacy of vaccines in preventing transmission, they did massive U-turns.
I've read enough history books to know that the people who do the censoring are never the good guys. And they've been censoring a lot of arguments for a very long time in the name of good. They are weaponizing virtue, and it's always in the name of tyranny. Anybody who is out here trying to silence an entire side of an argument on any subject, whether it's COVID-19, immigration, anything else, they are the evil people who are out for absolute mind control of the populace. And they should be feared.
I certainly agree that I think the healthiest thing for any democracy is for all views to be aired and debated. We seem to have lost the ability to debate. You know, when I interviewed you, yeah, we had a few fractious moments, but actually I thought it was a pretty spirited debate between people who perhaps had, preconceived views of each other. And I've got no problem interviewing you now about these, because I think you have an interesting take on this stuff.
And that's the key to life. When you reach that level of adolescence in your mindset where you can't handle any point of view that is contrary to your own, then you're truly a broken person. And that's what the internet is purporting. It's very interesting you said about Twitter being tribal. There's a large contingent of people on Twitter who simply cannot handle reading an opinion which differs from their own. And that is a degree of immaturity that we do not need adults to be functioning with in the modern world.
No, I agree. If you were Elon Musk, this idea of charging $8 now a month, whatever it is, to access the blue tick premium Twitter account, would you do that? Would you pay the extra?
I think that social media companies for a very long time have lived in an absolute fantasy where they've printed money from thin air by charging people for pixels, and they grew into these large conglomerates with too many staff sitting around doing nothing, having coffee breaks. And Elon Musk is a businessman. He's walked into the office and he's firing a bunch of people who are messing around doing nothing. And he wants his business to make money, as it absolutely should. And how he decides that happens is his prerogative. I don't see why we should sit and accept that a website needs 200,000 people sitting around discussing in long meetings, sitting on beanbags about policy of human rights of some garbage, when he's come along and said, no, I'm a businessman. We're going to charge for our service. We're going to reduce the number of staff. And we're going to be a functional, coherent company, as they should be. And it's his prerogative to do it, as he's bought the company. I think he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, because I remember the appalling censorship of the New York Post exclusive about Hunter Biden, the son of the president, about his laptop. This is 3 weeks before the election that Joe Biden won. He was heading, to a possible victory, but it was tight. And that story, they reckon, could have tipped it either way. But it was completely suppressed and censored, starting with Twitter, then Facebook, then others. Twitter literally locked out the New York Post account for 2 weeks for breaking a completely true story. I thought that was shameful.
It's worse than shameful. It's worse than shameful. When you control information, you control the real world. They affect the real world in real time. They are genuinely affecting the reality people live in. They are not just a company. They're not just a social media platform. It affects absolutely every single person on the planet when it changes who is elected. I don't want to comment specifically on Hunter Biden or the laptop. I would never kill myself. But I don't think it's fair that they would hide certain key information that close to an election. And the fact that they've done that was done specifically to affect the world that we all live in. And we all have to suffer the consequences of those things. So to sit and say that these companies can just do whatever they want and they're private, etc. No, free speech is beyond important for democracy. It's important for the reality that we exist under.
Andrew Tate, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, friend.
Well, next, Andrew Tate will spend the next month behind bars in Romania after losing the latest appeal against his detention. Tate and his brother Tristan are being held as part of an investigation into rape and human trafficking. Well, speaking outside court, Andrew Tate said he's done nothing wrong.
You know I'm innocent. There's not much justice in Romania.
Well, the pack is still with me. Plus, joining me now is the lawyer for the Tate brothers, Tina Glandian, who is in Romania. Well, welcome to you, Ms. Glandian. I really appreciate you joining me. Where are we with this case? It seems that every now and again this pops up back on television with them being remanded for further time. How long can that process continue before a charging decision is made?
Under Romanian law, they have up to 180 days, which is in 30-day increments. So every time there's a 30-day detention order, they're allowed to renew their request and have it extended for an additional 30 days, but not to exceed 180 days.
OK, you've taken on this case. Andrew Tate has been repeatedly bellowing his innocence as he's been led in and out of these court hearings and so on. Do you believe them? Do you believe that he and his brother are innocent?
At this point, Piers, they've had this investigation going since April. We're now February, and there are not even charges filed against them. So this is a huge injustice the way we see it. They should not be detained at this point. We think it's now crossed over to the point where it's violating international human rights law, because the deprivation of your liberty pre-trial is the most severe form of punishment a state can impose. And that's what they've done in this case. And they've had a very lengthy investigation with the government's resources. They've been analyzing and looking at all of their devices since April when they seized everything. And here we are, February, and charges aren't filed. So I think there's absolutely no evidence that's been presented. And that's our position.
How are your clients at the moment? How is Andrew Tate dealing with incarceration? I mean, I interviewed him just before Christmas. We had a long, wide-ranging interview.
Yes.
And once again, I was struck by the phenomenal following that he has online, particularly with young men. You know, he has an enormous following there. You and I know this has been whipped up now by that community into a huge framing of a narrative that this is complete injustice. There are others who think this has been a long time coming, that he's a bad human being and that he's going to face very serious charges, and that will be the last we see of him. But how is he faring right now, given that at the moment he's in this limbo land of no charging but being held in incarceration?
The brothers are both very strong, they're resilient, and they're holding up. But obviously, the conditions are not good. They're in a Romanian jail cell, and they've been detained for a very lengthy period at this point. They have limited access to their attorneys. It's not a good condition for them.
You've obviously represented a lot of people.
And as far as...
Sorry, please finish.
I was going to say, to your second point, they're controversial public figures, but that's not a crime. And at this point, we have not been provided any proof that they've committed any crimes, nor have they even been charged. So I would ask that people presume them innocent as they are.
Do they feel that they are being tried in the court of public opinion?
I think the public is divided, as you know. I think they have a big following, but at the end of the day, yes, I think there is a lot of information in the public. I think there's a lot of false allegations in the public. I think some evidence has now been put forth. Again, I don't want to comment too much on the facts of the case since there is an ongoing criminal investigation. However, I think there has been evidence put out, videos and other statements for the public to see what the supposed state of the evidence actually is.
It's been interesting to watch Andrew Tate's Twitter feed in particular, that he's continued to tweet. Is he doing that himself? Has he got people doing that for him? And how do you feel from a legal point of view? Is it a wise tactic to continue to do that on social media when you're being held in custody by the Romanian authorities?
Well, again, he doesn't have access, so he's not doing anything directly. And what's being put out is on his accounts, and I'm not going to speak as to, the source of the posts and what's being put out. But I think, again, as of now, he's not charged with anything, and he's free to comment publicly if he wishes to.
Yeah, we know that they seized nearly £3.5 million in cash, 11 luxury sports cars, guns and other weapons. Are any of the things that have been seized from the property, are they in themselves acts of law breaking, just the possession of any of these things?
To my knowledge, they're not. I think if they were, they would have been charged with crimes. Again, they had the initial search in April, and it's February. It's been 10 months, and no charges have been filed whatsoever. We have an ongoing criminal investigation for which this is a preventative detention, which is why they're in custody. Again, this is the most severe form of punishment. I don't think it's justified under these circumstances where the prosecution hasn't set forth enough evidence to charge them, and yet they are detained, and it's being prolonged.
But you do accept, of course, that if the women who've come forward here as part of the investigation, if they're telling the truth, these are very serious allegations against your clients, which could lead to charging, and if they're led to charging, could lead potentially to long prison sentences if found guilty.
Certainly the crimes at issue are very serious crimes, and I think, Pierce, actually it was on your show when you interviewed Tate several months ago. He made very strong statements about his position on rape, and he condemned rape, and he said it was disgusting, I'm pretty sure the word he used, and he said he thought that somebody who does that deserves the death penalty. So there's no question that these are serious charges, and even in his own words, they're very serious charges. There just isn't any evidence that they committed these crimes.
But we've also had tapes which have emerged in the last few weeks of him talking about rape to a woman in a pretty unsavory manner. So what is your response to that?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. You said what surfaced?
There have been various tapes have surfaced in part of media investigations in the last few weeks, including Andrew Tate talking about rape to a woman in a pretty unsavory manner. So what would your reaction be to that?
First of all, I think the authenticity of anything that is presented through the media as opposed to turned over to the defense needs to be questioned, because material is edited and it's easily manipulated. So first, I would say that. Secondly, I don't think certain text messages, I'm not here to judge or to talk to people's desires or fetishes, but certainly somebody could easily set someone up by saying they have certain fantasies, they want certain things done to them or said to them. And so there's a lot that goes into. You can't take a text message out of context. You first have to know, first of all, the entire context of it and what the background is. There needs to be explanation. So I think you have to keep all of that in mind when you're seeing something in the media.
We do, and we have to keep in mind also the judge's reasoning for all this. They explained on the 20th of January that they viewed the particular dangerousness of the defendants and their capacity to identify victims with increased vulnerability in search of better life opportunities. So all of this has to be taken into account. But it goes on, and as you rightly say, at the moment, there have been no charges against your clients. And until or if that point arrives, we're in a world of allegation, not actual charges.
Correct. And right now, exactly, there's a presumption of innocence that every accused has, and that attaches from the time you're even charged. And here, we're not even there. They haven't even charged them with crimes. So any sort of comments as to their alleged dangerousness, there's no evidence of that. There isn't even a presumption of that. They need to be presumed innocent, and that hasn't happened in this case. There's really a lack of evidence, and they are being detained unlawfully at this point.
Tina Glandian, I appreciate you joining me. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Piers.